Law 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. Imagine two entrepreneurs. The first spends 12 hours a day doing everything himself. He writes the code. He answers emails. He negotiates with suppliers. He designs the website. He handles customer complaints. He even makes the coffee. The second entrepreneur does something completely different. He asks, "What can only I do?" And then he finds other people to do everything else. Who do you think becomes more powerful? The obvious answer is the second. Because power is not just about effort, it's about leverage. The ability to turn the work of one person, a team, a system, or an institution into an outcome far larger than what you could produce alone. And this is where Law 7 becomes interesting, because Robert Greene pushes the idea further. Use the knowledge, labor, and experience of others, and make sure the final result is associated with you. But there's an important distinction. There is a difference between leadership and stealing credit. Great leaders often get credit because they assembled the right people, made the critical decisions, took the risks, and coordinated the system. That is very different from pretending someone else's contribution never existed. And one of the clearest examples is Steve Jobs. Apple's early history is impossible to understand without Steve Wozniak. Wozniak was the extraordinary engineer who designed much of the Apple I and Apple II. Jobs was not the person who personally designed every circuit board. His power came from something different. He understood product positioning. He understood presentation. He understood design. He understood customers. And perhaps most importantly, he understood how to turn technical capability into a company. That's leverage. One person builds the engine. Another person figures out where the engine can take the world. Neither role is meaningless, but the person who controls the organization often becomes the face of the outcome. And this happens in politics too. A president doesn't personally write every policy memo. A CEO doesn't personally analyze every spreadsheet. A military commander doesn't personally inspect every battlefield. A political campaign doesn't personally create every advertisement, poll, speech, legal strategy, and fundraising operation. Powerful people build systems around themselves. They recruit specialists, they delegate, they create teams. Then they make decisions at the level where their contribution matters most. So the practical lesson isn't make other people work while you do nothing. It's stop confusing busyness with power. If someone else can perform a task at 80% of your ability, but you can use that time to perform something only you can do, delegation becomes a strategic advantage. The most dangerous person in a competitive environment isn't necessarily the hardest worker. It's the person who knows where their effort has the highest leverage. But that creates another question. What happens if you don't want to chase someone? What if you want them to chase you? That's where Law 8 begins. Law 8. Make other people come to you. Think about a negotiation. Two companies want the same deal. Company A says, "Please choose us." Company B says, "We're interested. Here's what we can offer." And then they wait. Suddenly the negotiation changes. Why? Because whoever is chasing usually has less leverage. The person who controls the direction of movement often controls the negotiation. This is the central idea behind Law 8. Don't always go toward your opponent. Sometimes, make your opponent come toward you. Consider one of the oldest tools in business, scarcity. If a product is everywhere, people have little reason to act immediately. But if availability is limited, the psychology changes. Think about luxury watches, limited edition sneakers, exclusive memberships, private investment opportunities, even concert tickets. The seller isn't simply saying, "Buy this." The message becomes, you might not get another chance. And now the customer is moving toward the seller. This principle exists far beyond consumer products. In negotiations, companies sometimes create competitive bidding. Instead of begging one buyer to accept their terms, they invite multiple potential buyers to compete. Now the buyers come to them. The seller's leverage increases. But there's a more subtle version of this strategy. Don't reveal desperation. Imagine you're negotiating for a job. If the employer believes you have no alternatives, your bargaining position weakens. But if you're genuinely qualified and have multiple options, the employer has to compete for you. The same principle applies to investors, suppliers, employees, customers, and political alliances. This is why powerful people often cultivate alternatives. They don't want to need one person. They want several possible paths. Because the moment you desperately need one specific outcome, the other side can sense it. And desperation is expensive. But here's the dangerous part. Law 8 can easily become manipulation. Artificial scarcity, fake competition, false urgency, manufactured demand. These tactics can work in the short term, but they can destroy trust. So the useful lesson is not trick people into chasing you. It's build enough value and alternatives that you don't have to chase anyone. And this leads to something even more powerful. Because what if the other person is already coming toward you and starts arguing? Should you defeat them with better arguments? Not necessarily. Because sometimes winning the argument means losing the relationship. And that's Law 9. Law 9. Win through your actions, never through argument. Imagine you're sitting across from someone who strongly disagrees with you. You have facts. They have facts. You bring evidence. They bring counter-evidence. You raise your voice. They raise theirs. Eventually, one of you says, "I proved you wrong." Did you actually win? Maybe not. Because people don't always change their beliefs when they're presented with better arguments. Sometimes they become even more committed to the position they were defending. Psychologists call related phenomena things like motivated reasoning and belief perseverance. Once someone's identity becomes attached to an idea, attacking the idea can feel like attacking the person. That's why demonstrations can sometimes be more persuasive than debates. Consider the famous example of Galileo. His conflict with established authorities wasn't simply about who could produce the better argument in a room. The larger transformation came from observation, evidence, mathematical reasoning, and a changing scientific framework. The lesson is bigger than Galileo. Reality can end an argument that rhetoric cannot. You see the same principle in business. Suppose someone tells you, your company will never work. You can spend 3 hours explaining your business model, or you can build the company, get customers, generate revenue, and let the results answer the question. Results are arguments that don't need permission. This is why successful entrepreneurs often stop trying to convince everyone. They test, they launch, they measure, they iterate. Then they return with evidence. And politics provides an even more dramatic example. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement understood the power of visible action. Marches, boycotts, sit-ins, and non-violent demonstrations didn't simply ask opponents to intellectually agree with a philosophical argument. They made the conflict visible. They created pressure. They forced institutions and the public to confront a reality that could no longer be ignored. The action became the argument. And that's the deeper meaning of Law 9. Not never explain anything. Sometimes explanation is essential. Instead, when words and results compete, results usually have greater persuasive power. Think about two managers. Manager A tells employees, "I'm a great leader." Manager B quietly builds a high-performing team. Manager A talks about discipline. Manager B delivers projects. Manager A explains why customers should trust the company. Manager B creates a product customers actually trust. Who needs fewer words? The second one.